Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We will take a second to let folks hop on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Look at that. Look at those numbers going up. We got people here to see us this evening. That's amazing. Yes. All right, well, let's get started because you all seem to be excited to be here, so I will not hold it up. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's amazing, exciting program, Sacred Ground, Sacred Hands. We are so excited to welcome you all here, although virtually, still as exciting. And let me just say, we had a record number of registrants this evening. So together, we may make history with the largest MLK program in the museum's history. So exciting. I'll keep you all posted. Well, my name is Sabriyah Hassan-Ismail. And I am the Director of Programs at the Banneker-Douglass-Tubman Museum, your state's museum on African American history and culture. And today I join you for what will be, I think, my 8th MLK Day with the museum. I can't even believe I'm saying that. And I must say, this program for me is always like an exciting one because of multiple reasons. It kicks off the museum's calendar year of programs, coming off of the holiday high. And then, of course, just being here together with you all in community and service, and just honoring everything that MLK represents. So I won't, like I said, I won't hold you all long. And before handing the mic over to this evening's moderator and my amazing colleague, Alexandria Anderson, there are a few people that I like to recognize. First, of course, the museum's amazing staff. Nothing that we do is possible without them. Our director, Chanel Johnson, the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, our fabulous, fabulous, fabulous volunteers who are the backbone of the work we do at the museum. And then thank you to the Banneker-Douglass-Tubman Museum Foundation, our donors, and our Sacred Spaces exhibit sponsors. And then a special shout out to the Banneker-Douglass-Tubman Museum's committee for their support in elevating our museum's programs and exhibitions. And then the African American Heritage Preservation Program Grant Committee, that was a lot, for your work in protecting and preserving African American cemeteries in our state. And then finally, thank you so much to our presenters and all of you for joining us this evening. And without further ado, I will virtually hand the mic over to Miss Alexandria Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabriyah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alexandria Anderson, and I'm the Research Specialist for the African American Heritage Preservation Program. We appreciate you joining today's webinar entitled Sacred Grounds, Shared Hands, Volunteer Power and the Preservation of Maryland's Black Sacred Spaces. The Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture and the Banneker-Douglass-Tubman Museum recognizes the value and the power of community in preserving and honoring the resting places of our ancestors. From the formerly enslaved to pioneering educators, veterans, and community builders. We appreciate you joining us today to hear more about the importance of conserving African American cemeteries in Maryland, how local cemeteries have utilized volunteers to maintain these sacred spaces, and hearing more about best practices for engaging volunteers. Sabriyah Hassan and I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A feature, so please ask questions and let us know who you'd like to direct your question to. We will leave some time at the bottom of the hour to answer them. I'd like to first introduce you all to our first speaker, Hess Stinson. Hess is a poet, playwright, activist, ethnographer, storyteller, cultural strategist, and healing artist. As the founder of the Chesapeake Conjure Society, Hess's creative and community work as a hoodoo historian lives at the crossroads of heritage and environment. I'm going to turn it over to Hess at this time.
Alex and Sabriyah, thank you so much for that really warm introduction. And since time is precious, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen here. Presentation, present. All right, this presentation is titled Restoring Black Aliveness at Black Cemeteries, the importance and impact of volunteers at African American cemeteries, presented by me, Hess. Before we begin, we're going to pause and ground ourselves in the space that we're entering. We're going to talk about topics that bring up a lot of emotion, and necessarily so. Death is one of the few human experiences that we never fully understand despite our best efforts. And because we especially don't know what comes after death, it creates often discomfort and a deep sense of losing control. Often what we feel about spaces of rest like cemeteries and the deceased and their remains has more to do with our discomfort with death rather than the land itself or the people resting there. So to ground us, I offer a remix that one of my friends provided of an African American proverb, which is, it ain't the dead you have to worry about. It's the living that gets on my nerves, right? So there we're going to kind of push through with that grounding and begin with a brief overview of my agenda for this presentation. I'm going to talk about Beyond Death, which is Black aliveness, memory, care, and continued practice, the barriers to care for burial grounds, which is why cemeteries are neglected, return and grief, rebuilding cultural relationships to death, ecology, material culture, and belonging, which is aliveness and place, and ancestral stewardship, which is where we're going to get into how volunteers sustain memory and the future. But first, let's begin with the question of what is Black aliveness, particularly, and how do we extend it upon death? So, at first glance, that might sound oxymoronic, Black aliveness at a cemetery. But Black aliveness was theorized by Kevin Quashie in his book Black Aliveness, or A Poetics of Beings, and it refers to understanding our shared Black experience as not only through violence and trauma, but as a rich yet complex and sometimes contested, self-sufficient aesthetic and spiritual experience. It emphasizes beauty, art, and poetry in everyday life and being in the world rather than being against it consistently. So Black aliveness invites us to encounter Black being as it is, as a fuller habitat for existence, and to imagine Blackness as a vibrant realm of life, even amidst oppression. So in simple terms, while many forces constantly bid for our death, there are so many forces that make us alive, including each other. Black aliveness is found in relationship, and all relationships require places. Everything we do together requires time, space, and land. And all of those things require care, and care is a central metric of aliveness, which is an ongoing practice. And cemeteries around the world require that care in order to enliven our world-making practices. So when we neglect our cemeteries and we do not advocate for them, we participate in our own unaliveness. And especially historically Black cemeteries, which offer spiritual experiences and fuller habitats for being if we allow them to, which brings us to the next part of why Maryland? Well, first of all, we live here. It's like the answer that I give people when they say, why do you care about the environment so much? We live here. This is the only one we got, right? But we're gathered in Maryland. We're hosted through the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture and the Banneker-Douglass-Tubman Museum. And despite Maryland's deep cultural richness, Black cemeteries across the state are facing an ongoing crisis. They're often undervalued, they're often underfunded, and they are completely vulnerable. Benjamin Franklin once said, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, show me the condition of a cemetery and I'll show you the quality of its people. And although the conditions of our cemeteries are not an accurate reflection of the quality of who we are, it is a reflection often of our experiences and how those experiences have shaped and often dictate what we do spend time and attention to. So while systemic underinvestment and erasure and overdevelopment are real, there are still ways that we, the people, can infuse aliveness into a place. Maryland holds a profound Black history. Of course, as we know, it is home to Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and Benjamin Banneker, who are the namesakes of the museum. But the thing about the Black history here in Maryland is that it's not past tense. It is constant and present and ongoing. All of us in this room are making Black history right now in this moment. And cemeteries particularly hold that continuance. Yeah, African American cemeteries are at risk. Across the country, they are facing environmental destruction, littering, and an overdevelopment. For example, Bethesda, the Moses Cemetery was paved over for a parking lot. And again, in Baltimore City, the Laurel Cemetery, too, was paved over for a parking lot. When cemeteries are avoided or erased, Black aliveness is literally and figuratively, but especially literally paved over. Then that puts us into neglect, erasure, and invisibility, which remains persistent threats, and cemeteries are amongst the most visible sites where these things show up. Particularly right now when we are fighting to not be neglected, to have funding, to make sure people know our history, to make sure people know that we are here consistently. What gets in the way of volunteering now that we have set the time and space? So oftentimes people, if we're getting over the fear of volunteering at a cemetery, there's just not a lot of appeal, to be honest with you. It's not what we would call a really sexy thing to do, right? So what gets in the way often for volunteering? There's typically a discomfort with grief and death, which is very understandable in the human experience. However, living in the Western world, our relationships and our understandings of grief and death are perverse in so many ways. As many of us can attest to, oftentimes someone dies and we get to cry for a couple of days and we have to go back to work. And so that doesn't give us much space to explore what those phenomena look like inside of our bodies because we have to constantly keep going. Because of that, there's a cultural distance from burial traditions, from the Gullah Geechee down to the folks in New Orleans. Those are some of the last strongholds where the particular African American burial traditions take place. Yet burial traditions that were just as rich and vibrant existed all across the nation. It is because of distance from grief and death, the rising cost of funerals, and also the lack of investment in our cemeteries that we are losing recipes when it comes to that. There's lack of awareness and access around cemeteries, and there's mostly an assumption that someone else is handling it. And we typically realize that someone else isn't handling it until we see things get overgrown or unkempt. And our assumption is that somebody's doing it, but not me. There's often environmental neglect, litter, lack of investment, which leads to unsafe walking conditions. You're not going to walk somewhere where you think you might trip and fall on something where there's a lot of litter. Aesthetically pleasing things do get engaged more. And then also displacement from family burial sites. So what happens even more with overdevelopment, gentrification, is that a lot of times people are pushed away from their family burial sites. They're no longer close. And the places of where your great greats and your greats are buried are stories that no longer get passed on because there is no immediate placemaking understanding. And there's also a lack of knowledge around where your ancestors are buried. There are a lot of people who do not know where all of their ancestors, at least for the past 3 or 4 generations, are buried. I feel blessed because a lot of my ancestors are right here in Annapolis, with many of them who died a while ago being in Brewers Hill themselves. But there are still even a few family members of mine who I have no idea where they're at. And these things gets in the way of volunteering because when we don't have a relationship with the place, we don't see the need to invest in it with our energy. So the next step to do is to transform our relationship to grief and return. Imagine how we feel about cemeteries when most of the time the only times we visit them is when we're putting a loved one or a friend or a neighbor in the ground and we're not going back to that place ever again until the next time that we have to do it. You're not going to have the best or most fond memories of that place. So we're having disrupted grief traditions because we're not visiting the sites of our grief again and again and again. The more you visit a place, the more, not desensitized, but the more you get to see the other things that makes it alive, the more open you are to stories outside of your own and your sadness. And the more you visit a place with community, imagine a place where you can be hugged and loved on and laugh and dance and sing outside of a funeral, but still be invited to grieve. The disruptive grief traditions have everything to do with disrupted traditions around ecological places, around place, around accessibility to places. Communities were once community spaces. Cemeteries were once community spaces. To be quite honest, everyone talks about the lack of third spaces. Cemeteries are one of the last free third spaces that we have left, in addition to libraries. You literally can go to the cemetery, no one's going to bother you. There's complete solitude. And if you're ever trying to wrestle your attention span back again, that's one of the best places to do it because there is no living to bother you. You're there with your thoughts and with the stories that are present. And then also, there's a need for more models of how to embody the principle of Sankofa, which means to go back and fetch it. We need more community members and leaders to show us what it looks like to revisit the sites of our grief in a way that can turn out to be empowering so that we can keep visiting and keep remembering and keep learning more stories. So let's give you a case study of what that looks like, because we're not just going to talk about it, we're going to be about it. Case study is All Saints Day the Hoodoo Way at Mount Auburn in Baltimore, Maryland. It's a celebration that's been going on for several years now, and it was actually inspired by the All Saints Day celebrations at Brewers Hill, and then before that, the All Saints Day celebrations in New Orleans. And it's a combination of both, but what it particularly does, it manifests the traditions and ritual making of hoodoo to the top. So there's less syncretization with Christianity and more things like ring shouts and libations and altar building. It's November 1st of every year, which is also the same day as Maryland Emancipation's Day. And people come together, we sing, we dance, we hold hands, we scream, we shout, we holler, we eat, we have food, we remember, we do so many beautiful things in this place. And it's also gotten people to learn more about Mount Auburn itself. People have learned more about Mount Auburn being one of the few cemeteries during the AIDS pandemic to accept people who died of HIV/AIDS. We learned more about the impact of the Spanish flu on the Black community. It's a place where history got resurfaced in so many ways. And what also happened is that there were so many people who come out to All Saints Day every year who hadn't been there in 10, 15, 20 years. Every day we pick up, every time we go to Mount Auburn for All Saints Day, we pick up this litter around the cemetery. So there's literally cleaning. The biggest and the first most important part is to clean, is to imbue that care of the cemetery. Some of the graves are clean. Sometimes people feel called to a particular stone, they clean them off. Names are spoken, particularly our community shifts and shapes, and people come out because they want to know who they are. And All Saints Day the Hoodoo Way gives them a ritualized, culturally relevant way to experience who they are, not only who they are and who they come from, but also who they are in community. One thing I want to focus your attention on before we go to the next slide is this middle picture right here. This was our most recent All Saints Day in November, a couple of months ago. This young lady came and she knew that her great or great great grandmother was buried in Mount Auburn. Mount Auburn is a massive cemetery. So the chances of her finding her person's gravesite were very slim, but she came out anyway to come pick up trash, to come be in fellowship with everyone. When we went to a certain part of the cemetery to do our ring shout, she literally almost kind of tripped over a placard and she moved her hand away and it was literally her great great grandmother. So what you're seeing is that everyone was congratulating her. There were cries, there were tears of joy, there was dancing, there were just shouts of like, hey, hey, we're so happy for her. And that's the kind of magic that happens when you can revisit a grief space in the community. A lot of these times, these ancestors want to be known, want to be seen, and they come out. And people are felt. And even for the people who didn't find their folks, you have that real, genuine joy of someone having an ancestor return to them because they were brave enough to revisit the space and take care of it. Almost done here. What it means to put aliveness back into a place. So Black aliveness means our presence. We literally have to show up. It means our stewardship, which is also to take care, not just to show up and talk, but to move our bodies to take care as we can within our capabilities. And also when we show up and we're taking care of it, we refuse to disappear and we refuse to allow that place to disappear because it becomes culturally relevant, becomes it gets to the top of our social imaginations, enlivens our social conversations, it becomes a more relevant place again. It also enlivens Black ecological aliveness because then we see cemeteries as a living landscape. When we're there living, we then can look at the other things that are living there, the birds, the trees, the plants, the grass, the bugs, the things that are making this place especially what it is. And then it gets people more in tune with Black ecological legacy when they're in a cemetery. Cemeteries are understudied, underutilized Black ecological spaces of legacy. And there's so much we can learn about the more than human world around us when we engage in cemeteries, because in a lot of ways, they are essentially parks. Again, they're one of the last few free third spaces that we have as a community. Plants, material, culture, and belonging. So, for an example, historically Black cemeteries often have particular markers of certain plants. You have yucca, you have cedar for trees, you have periwinkle. And some of the cemeteries I've gone to, there's been Black walnut trees that show up, and I haven't really seen them in any other cemeteries. Brewer Hill, for example, a Black walnut tree near one of my ancestors, and it's one of my favorite trees to go visit. And then also, if things get unearthed, if dirt moves around, you might even see on occasion offerings and other ways of placemaking onto a grave site. So you might see bottles, you might see shells, you might see coins, you might see the remains of fruits and things. There's a material culture where we can look, and environmental culture where we can look and see a reflection of ourselves in the more than human world. Volunteering as an ancestral practice, it is. It's one of the most necessary parts of an ancestral practice because stewardship, caring for something, makes you a descendant of it. When you are a steward of something, when you care for it, it is yours. There's a quote from a Toni Morrison book, and it said, "Children are simple. If you love them, they're yours." That's the same thing for cemeteries. If you love it, it's yours. If you take care of it, it's yours. Care is a form of belonging, not only to be simply sit back and receive all the care, but to give care. It feels really good. And it's a way that you become a part of a space because your energetic footprint is there. And again, it's an ancestral practice because ancestral veneration means we don't forget. And we volunteer somewhere, it prevents absolute erasure. So there is a quote I'm going to have us go into where it says, "They say you die twice, once you stop breathing, and again when your name is spoken for the last time." If anyone ever saw the movie Coco, which is such a cute and adorable movie, it goes through that theme of what it means to die again because you are not remembered. When we go to these cemeteries, when we do this work, when we say their name in libation or even just prayer, we are making sure that as many of our ancestors as possible are not dying twice in a world where that would have them die twice consistently. We are bringing them back to life. We are bringing the place back to life. I'm going to nearly end this with a quote from one of my friends, Shavonda. She says that grief is the part of aliveness that nobody likes. The key is to figure out how to grieve without suffering, since grieving is a way to be in possession of ourselves. If we didn't grieve, we wouldn't be alive. And feel free to screenshot this one. It's just a basic overview of how cultural grief work supports cemetery stewardship. And again, it restores relationships. People know how to return to the place, to each other, to their ancestors. It reframes the care of a cemetery as a responsibility and not just a site of trauma, because in this world, Black people often die through very traumatic means, whether it is by direct violence or indirect negligence. And so by caring for the cemeteries, becomes a responsibility and not a revisit of trauma consistently. And then also, third, it makes the meaning visible. A lot of times we have to see, touch, taste, hear, feel things to make them feel real. And in the cemetery, you have all these sensorial experiences to make things real in your life and in your imagination. So at the end, cultural grief work heals people and activates places. It can be found in and in service as a resuscitator of historically Black cemeteries. And we'll close with this with a question, which is, which cemeteries are waiting for you to help them come alive again? And after this presentation with Briayna and Rebecca, we hope that you do wonderful and delicious research and start visiting these places. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hess. We really appreciate your presentation and really interrogating that question and contextualizing this program with speaking to the importance of these spaces and why they're so special. And I'd like to now introduce Briayna Cuffie. Briayna is a public historian, consultant, and author based in Annapolis, Maryland. Briayna is also a co-founder and the racial equity advisor for reparations for slavery. And she will be speaking about how Brewer Hill Cemetery is utilizing volunteers to advance their cemetery conservation goals. Briayna, please feel free to share.
Man, I don't know what just happened to voice. There we go. Perfect. Let me hit my button here. So I'm gonna take you all on a journey in explaining it through our website, using our website. And so can people see it? Someone confirm for me? Okay. Um, and I'll minimize this, so hopefully that helps. But hello, everyone. I just realized I can see the number of participants on, and I'm like, oh man, so many people come on to hear us talk. At least I know with Hess and I talk fairly regularly, and I feel like we talk about this all the time. So I guess like an insight into the conversations that she and I have. Um, but to start, I'll say that our approach to volunteers and engagement has really shifted in the last few months. My grandfather is the current president of Brewer Hill Cemetery, and he has been on and off for, I think, the greater part of like 20 years. But my mother and I were raised at quite the overlap of a few people, given the longevity of life. And so his priority, his commitment to ancestors and history and the kind of the aspects of life and community that people kind of forget is very much entrenched in me as well. And so I will start with saying, I'll say our approach to volunteers falls under can be talked about in three words, I'll say. So structure, training, and education. And at least in my mind, that's kind of where they all fall. So one of the hallmarks of what people understand and know about Brewer Hill is that it's this dilapidated cemetery that they pass by going down West Street. And it's so much more than that. It's also so much larger than people realize that it is. It is a 5-acre cemetery. Most cemeteries, black ones especially, are not that large. They're much smaller. And so it stands out in that way, from its condition, but also its size. Um, People do not know really how the cemeteries are supposed to work, how they're supposed to operate, how they're supposed to sustain. They just know that they're supposed to exist and that people are buried there. They don't really understand what goes into it. Teasing out the technical pieces. To give you an example of, everyone knows what a nonprofit is and assumes everything that's a nonprofit is a 501(c)(3). Cemeteries have to be a 501(c)(13). Well, what does that mean as far as donations, time, the fact that people pay for plots? And the cost of internment. So really even just the granular pieces of cemeteries and what it means to, prepare for a family member to be interred there. And even training for the officers of it, what, as a treasurer, as a secretary, what documents need to be done throughout the year or need to be re-upped every year with the state, with the IRS. There's a municipality, because of course Brewer Hill is in the city of Annapolis. And so training and education across the board. In this day and age, structure, I'll say, is more important than ever. And Hess actually hit on a couple of the points that I was going to make in walking you all through this. Because in general, people don't know how cemeteries work. We at the individual level especially don't. Those are not particulars that get passed down. Um, A lot of times, especially with the bulk of cemeteries, they're associated with the church. Brewer Hill is unique in that it is not. It's its own nonprofit entity. Most cemeteries, black or white, are associated with some church. And so there's a regular collection, or through people's tithes and offerings, or whatever the case may be, there is some sort of sustenance fund for the cemetery that just kind of goes untalked about. It's a line item in the budget, if you will, or there may be a special collection. I know our Black participants will that phrase will sound familiar. In going to church, taking up a special collection, passing around a separate plate, and so. That the education piece is one that I really take serious, especially as a public historian, as a genealogist, because it doesn't just have to be transactional or kind of lecture style. I really aim to have people see themselves, whether in that mainly being through genealogy or geography, through history and politics. So the importance for me is situating people into history and situating the place into history, into the people's lives, and what that means for, especially as far as descendants go, how they are living life, how they have considered living life, their involvement, and for a lot of times when it comes to white participants of tours or that are looking for information or teasing through things, how they can live their values as far as what they say their leanings are politically. How can they walk the walk? Whether that's through donation, time volunteering, what have you. And so, I'll go into it through the layout of the website. So, a couple of factors going into this and going into our engagement with volunteers. And actually, like I mentioned, Hess hit on quite a few of them. So, the emotional, familial and geographical disconnect is the center of a lot of kind of rehabilitating interest and sustainability at Brewer Hill. So for a myriad reasons, whether it's income challenges, skill set and manual labor differences, because we are not a generation that is full of people who have trades. A lot of us are ones that have gone to college, that dream that our parents or grandparents had for us. And so those skill sets of carpentry and electrician and plumber and all that, where people did their volunteering, their service in kind. I'm the one to pay for it. I'm gonna Venmo. I'm gonna cut the check. I cannot. I can do the basics, the bare minimum, but that is what so many of our predecessors were doing. And it just happened. And so as those people pass away, those acts are no longer happening. And so having to create an infrastructure, an operating budget of how much that's going to cost, where that money's going to come from, who it's coming from, whose network can be finessed to make that happen. And so, and along with geographical separation, like Hess so noted, how people feel about grief and it being, a location centered around death, and that bringing up so many questions and concerns and feelings for people. But with all that being said, when we went about doing the website, um, I really focused on, if I'm a descendant or if I'm looking to take part in being active in the cemetery, what do I need to know? What's going to make me want to take part in it? What can be used to garner interest from other people, not just descendants, but, politicians for funding. Bond bills is something we've gotten. We just received a grant from the Maryland Historical Trust, and so through the commission, we've received grant funds through the commission. And so how do we make all of that understandable? And so to really understand kind of what you're getting into, how to find and cultivate a connection, we really list out kind of anything that could draw someone to being interested in the cemetery or understanding it. And so I'll scroll through a bit here. The main page, we give kind of the quick highlights. So there's so much about history people don't know with regard to the military, and part of that being, and I actually need to update this number, over 200 veterans buried at Brewer Hill. Going back to, if I want to say correctly, there's at least one from not just the Spanish-American War, but the Indian Wars. One of some of the latter wars, since that spanned a large segment of time. One of the veterans entered there serving in the Indian Wars. And if you do a quick Google, that is quite a few hundred years in the past. Spanish-American War was just at the end of the 18th or 19th century, sorry. But veterans, a lot of times is a piece where people will get interested, and I'm sure Rebecca will say a bit about that, given Reefs Across America. So I'll leave that there. Um, Historical figures. Annapolis is the capital. It has been since the 1690s. There's bound to be people buried here of historical significance, which there are. You have preachers, you have philanthropists, you have the formerly enslaved who were written about in newspapers and talked about. You have the victims of extrajudicial lynchings. You have a greater understanding of how society was operating, in that it became a potter's field. And so people who had no relation or connection to the area are also buried at Brewer Hill because they created a working relationship with the county to allow for that. And so highlighting some of those. And then, of course, like Hess mentioned, Sankofa, cemeteries being a place of historical and genealogical assistance, which is, I'm sure sounds odd to hear, but there, for me and growing up, my sense of self was the foundation that was made for me was you can't know yourself without knowing who your people were, where they came from, what they were doing, and how they fit into history. That's a part of you. And so that has to be taken into consideration as you mature and grow into your own person. And just down here is kind of the contact information. It's like a little section, but I'll go through a couple of these. And so one of the things when it comes to volunteers, noting that there's a variety of ways to help. And so I know the primary one people see and think of is landscaping. But there are thousands of people buried at Brewer Hill. And so every Wednesday, is an assortment of people at the archives pouring through death certificates, and any other documents that they can come across to piece together who and where people were, who they were related to, and cross-checking information. And so listing on the website surnames so that people even have a place to know where to start, whether you know a little bit about your family history or a lot, looking for the surnames that you do know, or seeing them and going, I wonder if I'm related to them, and seeing I know that last name, or, that's a cousin of a cousin. But the genealogical help is one of the ways in which we use volunteers. And even the button here around, if you are someone who knows, me and all of my myriad funeral programs that I've digitized, providing those things so that people can piece together even more of their ancestors, of history, what have you. Um, Same thing with veterans. So even making the case when it comes to entitlements from what is now the Department of War, but also Veterans Affairs, teasing out that information. We've got a couple of people locally who put in for posthumous um, awards and statuses that our black soldiers should have had, but having a concentrated place of those names, of that information, so that the case can further be made, the descendants can be provided what they should have while their ancestor was living. Um, and so I'm listing out the veterans here, and then even just kind of giving an idea of partnerships. So we haven't extended it some more. I've got a couple more actually to add, but even just to give an idea of the options here. So we can always count on the Boy Scouts and the folks from our local Latter-day Saints to come and do annual cleanups. I'm a contractor now with Historic Annapolis, doing the tours that we started doing last year, to highlight some of the people buried there and garner interest, and is at this point, primary fundraiser towards the cost of landscaping. And of course, the archives, who is shouldering, the host of information and paperwork. Um, and so we leave kind of donation for last, I guess, because that's the one way I feel like people always know that they can contribute, right? They can take part. But the longevity, the sustainability aspect of the donation is important. A lot of people are used to doing, one-off donations, but it's the recurring donations, no matter how small, $10 a month, $20 a month, that all adds up. Those that buys cases of water for volunteers doing landscaping, that buys snacks, that buys, giving someone a gas card for, they're willing to drive down from Baltimore to help run an event or do something. It allows for us to continue to move on and getting and pursuing funding in other ways, but also thanking the people that are showing up, including probably some of you that have joined us this evening. But as a millennial, writing checks, I'll say, is not my thing. And so the structure, even around donations, was okay, you all have Zelle. Do we have Cash App? We have PayPal. What are our options here? What can I set and forget as a millennial? Like, okay, you want to take $15 a month great. I'll build it into, my monthly expenses. But the kind of ad hoc nature of things does not work for so many of us that are constantly on the go. And so thinking about it in that way of, oh, well, that's easy. You mean I can put even having some older folks mention that where they're like, I won't have to just remember to keep writing checks and mailing them. Oh, this is perfect. And not even realizing that that was an option, including, the where it goes. And so, giving people an idea, especially of how much what they're donating, will lend itself to. And that's another thing of people figuring out how much to donate where, okay, well, let me let you know that's what that'll cost. Our maintenance services is about, and depending on the company and the extensiveness, between a $1,000 and $1,800 for the entire 5 acres. So we had someone do a whole, they wrote a check to sponsor and a full scale in-depth landscaping, which only needs to be done a couple times a year, but the maintenance landscaping in between costs as well. But that also turns into something that helps people figure out just what is needed and how they can be a part of it and the extent to which it's required. And so that's one of the things I'll say, as far as volunteer engagement. So the approach is really there's a space, there's a place, an option for everyone, whether you are near or far, physically able or not, have, the additional funds to be able to put in or not. There is, tech savvy or not, there is always an avenue for someone to get involved. And it's a matter of what your kind of interest or niche is. And what you have available to us, and just kind of assigning you and being able to check in, whether it's intermittent or more consistent. I mean, one of my big, as a voluntold person, is this website. So this is where the bulk of my hours have gone for the last couple of months, as far as my commitment to Brewer Hill Cemetery. The back end coding, aside from, doing tours, but the back end coding, the figuring out all the logistics and photos, getting permission from the newspapers that post about us and do write-ups to copy over what they post about, and help people, avoid a paywall and get it up here so the information can be out. But that is where the bulk of my time has gone. And I'll stop sharing, because I'll close out. But other examples, I know some people probably came to the town hall. My cousin, funny enough, run by entirely my family members. So Tiana and Callan, Callan using her expertise to help with grants, Tiana using her expertise and her experience at the county level to find funders and connections to help amplify its needs. And so, I'll end there because I know I'm running up on Rebecca's time and Q&A time. But anyone that knows me knows that I could talk about this stuff forever. But I will end there saying that there is always a way to volunteer. It's a matter of how.
Thank you so much, Brianna. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you highlighting the very sophisticated system you guys have developed at Brewer Hill and trying to engage with folks in multiple ways, highlight this rich history and the folks that are resting there. And hopefully everyone is able to um, benefit from this conversation and hearing about how you could potentially replicate or implement one of these systems at your own cemetery, or you're hearing ways that you can participate, whether it's from home, like you mentioned, in person, through research. Everyone has a different skill set and everyone has something they can contribute to these really special places. And now at this time, I'd like to introduce our last speaker, Rebecca Britt. Rebecca is a retired police captain with over 26 years of dedicated service to the community. Rebecca is also the founder and CEO of Britt Consulting, a firm driving equality, leadership, and preservation of ancestral history through service, engagement, and empowerment. She will be talking about her experience volunteering at cemeteries, specifically Brewer Hill as well, and sharing suggestions on how to engage volunteers. And here at the Commission and the museum, we also know Rebecca very well because she volunteers her time here at the museum, at the Banneker-Douglass-Tubman Museum. And you might see her all around Annapolis. She's such a busy person, and so we thank you for joining us, Rebecca.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen briefly. Okay. So my name is, I'm a retired Captain Britt. I work with the Metro Transit Police Department. I did 26 years. And I would volunteer, when I had free time. It was very busy because I was a lieutenant also before I became a captain in charge of the detectives. But I picked the bug up from volunteering from my mother. My mother loved to volunteer and she would always stress it. So that was the one thing that we wanted to do, or I wanted to do growing up, was volunteering. One of the things I learned how to volunteer about was also, because I was retired, I felt, okay, I need to do something. I was going crazy and I was just like, okay, I need to get out of this house and doing something. So I moved to Annapolis about 10 years ago, and I started volunteering for my homeowners association. So I said, you know what, I need to get out and do more. So whether you're doing a nonprofit, whether you're doing in the school, every organization definitely can use volunteers. One of the things is that volunteers actually expand capacity, they impact their reach. Volunteers, you may get volunteers that live in different areas and they can go out in the areas where they live, which may not be where the organization is, and spread the word. They have strong engagement, increases retention. They also become advocates of your mission. And I think that's very important because one of the things when I started volunteering with Brewer Hill, and I'll get to that, how I started, I started putting the word out about Brewer Hill. Did you know about Brewer Hill? Did you know that this was in Annapolis? Did you know that, for example, the one of the founders of the AKA and Wally Bates are buried in Brewer Hill? And that actually began an engagement of conversation and how people can support your mission. And then also it brings to builds trust, belonging, and shares ownership. I always believe in buy-in. And so volunteers that are helping out there, trust me, they have your buy-in, or you have their buy-in. So you have to understand today's volunteers. Years ago, volunteers would sometimes just give every weeknight for 4 to 5 hours. But now everybody has busy schedules. So one of the things is that they need flexibility. You may have a volunteer that works in the evenings, that it can volunteer in the morning, and vice versa. Also, they have to have desire meaningful and valuable impact. Just getting someone to file may not be their niche, but you may have a volunteer that's all they want to do. So I would say engage your volunteers and find out what they're good at and what they want to do. Also, have clear communications and expectations. Let them know what you need. Let them know how they can help. And then ask them, how can I help you? also value inclusiveness. Your volunteers are there, and that's the one thing I definitely can say about the Banneker-Douglass-Tubman Museum. The employees that work there, they work there all day, every day, but they value our inclusiveness because I'm a docent for the museum, and so they also ask us our opinions. What do you think? We have a welcoming environment. We have meetings where you meet with your docents and they talk about the different things that they can do to help the museum. And then always remember this. People and volunteers are motivated by purpose, not pressure. Think about a opportunity, or think about something that you wanted to do and you enjoyed it. But if someone put pressure on you, the fun, you lost the fun of it. So that's very important to understand. So build a culture of belonging. Greet volunteers by their name. I always believe a personal relationship. And when I say that, I mean by their name. So people call me Miss Britt. No, my name is Rebecca. My name is Becca. That's how I like to be called. However, some people may say, okay, I want it to be formal. Greet your volunteers by their name. Ask them what they would like to be called. Some people like to be called by their nickname. Encourage collaboration and peer support. That's how you get buy-in. That's how you have your volunteers to come and give their ideas. You may think, okay, we can't figure out how to do this, but your volunteers will come in and they can give their ideas, and also peer support is very important. And then recognize and appreciate. I always believe that. Coming from a police department, a male-dominated field, one of the things I always did with anybody, officers, detectives, my sergeants, I appreciate them and I recognize them. I recognize the hard work. I recognize that they go out every day and what they do. They appreciate that. Because of the recognition and appreciation, they're more willing to give their time to your mission and to your cause. And then also create a culture of respect, gratitude, and transparency. If something can't be done, let them know. Don't hide them. Don't put anything, oh, well, we just can't do that. Let them know. We've tried to do this before, and unfortunately, because of guidelines, because of different budget cuts, because of different type of permits, we are unable to do this at this time. You will be surprised how much your volunteers know and can say, well, look, you know what? I know some organization that went through this, and therefore, let me give you my advice on what they did to actually get over that hurdle. And respect is always a must, and gratitude. So some of the key takeaways, and if I'm talking too fast, let me know, because I want to be able to let everyone answer, give questions and answers. Key takeaways: engagement is intentional, it's not accidental. And I say this personally because the way I found out about Brewer Hill is I'm in a group called Black Girls Run, and I am the ambassador for the Annapolis chapter. And each year we try to do something around the holidays, but then we said, you know what, we're going to try to do something every quarter, just volunteer. So we found out about Wreaths Across America. I knew about Wreaths Across America because every year, though I work for the transit police, we will have a special detail for Arlington Cemetery. Well, one year I said to our community services branch, is there a reason why we can't go and assist? And then I went on the website and I realized that it's just not Arlington Cemetery. It initiated in Arlington Cemetery and it started there in 1992. Wreaths Across America is all over the United States. So I put in my zip code and the Annapolis Cemetery came, Veteran Cemetery. And I thought to myself, I go by there mostly every day. So 2022, we started volunteering. In 2023, when we went to volunteer, they said this year we're going to place wreaths at the veterans' graves in Brewer Hill. And we thought, wait a minute, that's right next door. So our group went over, we participated in it, and we looked around and said, this cemetery is not kept up like the Annapolis Veterans Cemetery. So we started asking questions, started reaching out to our aldermen, started reaching out to different organizations, and luckily we were able to reach out to a young lady, Miss Linda, a wise woman. She was the groundkeepers, and we kept pushing, saying, look, is there some way that we can volunteer? And I know a lot of people say, okay, well, volunteering, they really don't do it. No, we wanted to. And so we kept pushing. And then finally, she was able to get me in touch with Brianna's grandfather, which I didn't know at the time when I found out I met Brianna, Mr. Harris. And I told Mr. Harris, I said, look, I want to volunteer, and I'm not just saying that. I really want to volunteer. So Mr. Hurd said, we're having a meeting come up, and at that time they needed a bid to do the actually house, the caretaker's lodge and the fence. And he said, in one of the stipulations of the grant, we must have put the bid out to a female-owned engineering firm. Not only did I get him one, I got him six. And then I told him three of them are around in the area. So just in case one of them get it, you don't have to worry about the organization or the firm actually billing you for travel. So that was one of the things, and that's how I got into with Brewer Hill. And then one day looking at the different heritage and the notes on the City of Annapolis website, I found the Civil Service Board and inquired about that. And now I'm on the Civil Service Board for the City of Annapolis, and also I volunteer at my granddaughter's school, in addition to volunteering with our running groups. So one thing you should remember, volunteers thrive when they are supported and valued. You don't appreciate, it's like an employee, but employees get paid. Paid employees, you give them a compensation for it. Volunteers, they give their time and their heart. So please support them and value them. Like I said, clear communication is the foundation of everything. Spell it out. What can be done? What can't be done? What you need. Instead of, for example, hey, go over and file this. Let them know. I need this to be organized because I have to do this. Transparency is also the key. And I stress again, communication and appreciation drive retention. If you appreciate and clear communication with your volunteers, they'll be more willing to help you, and then spread the word to their friends and to their relatives about the great organization you have, and they will also help to promote your mission. Okay, call to action. Start volunteering today. Choose at your interest area. Brewer Hill was our interest area. Reach across America. Contact the organization to inquire about volunteer opportunities. A lot of organizations may not put it on their website, but they would love for someone to come in and volunteer to help them out, to do things that sometimes are not in their budget to do, or simple positions, like, for example, grant writing. A lot of organizations, and some organizations call it technical writing, but grant writing, a lot of organizations would like someone with that experience to come in, help them find grants, and help them write it. Start small. When I say small, I started with Black Girls Run and then went to Reach Across America and the Civil Service Board. So when it says start small, I know sometimes you have a lot of interest. Start somewhere where you say, you know what, I can donate maybe 2 hours a week or 5 hours a week, and go from there. And then you never know, that works out. And then if you want, and if you see that, okay, this is working out, you can volunteer your time at other organizations. But always remember to start small so you won't get burned out. And then stay connected. Stay connected to the newspaper, social media, stay connected to the organization's mission. They may have a call for volunteer, or they may have an event, like Brewer Hill had the event at the Wally Bates Center. I volunteered for that. Stay connected, because there are a lot of organizations that have different events and meetings, and they're looking for someone to share their expertise and to help them. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you don't understand something, feel free to ask questions. That's what they're there for. And also, you will get more knowledge when you ask questions. I had a teacher that always said a no question is a dumb question, because I would, in staff meetings, I would ask a question, because a lot of times people want to know, why are we doing this? And a lot of times, like, be honest, millennials, my daughter is a millennial. When I say something to her, she says, well, why am I doing this? And I explain it, because they want to know the reason behind it. And that's very important. And lastly, set them up for success. Be welcoming, simple onboarding, like Briayna said, training, provide clear instructions and points of contact. That's a very important method. For us, for example, when we became docents, we had Miss Johnson's number, Sabriyah's number. We had everyone's number. So if we had any questions, we knew who to contact. And then match the roles and strengths and interests. For example, I know I am not a math whiz, so I will not volunteer to be anyone's accountant. I know that up front. But I know I have a vast experience in security, consulting. So that will be my area of expertise, and that will be the role I will look at with different things. That also helped me, like I said, with the Civil Service Board, because I dealt with grievances, I dealt with CBAs. So that was my area of expertise. So that was the role I have. So match the roles with the interests. And then also share success stories and inspire confidence. You can give a success for, like, for example, with Brewer Hill, that we started at Brewer Hill. We got the word out. Now we have a wonderful webpage managed by Briayna. So share those success stories. And that would not be possible if we did not have volunteers for Brewer Hill. For example, Mr. Harris, he, I believe, has found 3,700 names going to the archives every Wednesday. But he doesn't go by himself. He has volunteers. So that is a wonderful success story. And it helps inspire confidence where people can think, you know what, I can help with this, and I can help with increasing the numbers they found, or also I can help with the different events. So that's very, very important. And also remember, in closing, your time is powerful. Every hand, every effort, contribution strengthens our community and moves it forward. For Hess's presentation, that hit home very much. How you have the volunteers, and how you have the All Saints Day. That is very important. So everybody strengthens the community and helps us to move forward, so we can achieve the mission, and also we can retain our mission and achieve our goals. So always remember, volunteering is something dear to my heart, and I hope it becomes something dear to your heart also.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I really, really appreciate you going through all the ways that you came into volunteering at African American cemeteries, as well as all the ways people can contribute from home, in person, through research, through a one-time event. And I will say, just like we're doing so today, consider using holidays to highlight and celebrate our ancestors, our family, service. There's just a lot that goes into the maintenance and care at African American cemeteries, especially where they are and how they're designed. And so every little bit counts, and everybody has something to offer. So
And also, one last thing to offer. One of my friends, she lived in Tampa, and she came up in December because she's a part of the Black Girls Group in Tampa, and she volunteered at Reefs Across America, and she enjoyed it so much that when she found out that they had different events there, she went back home, and for the last 2 years, she's organized a group to do Reefs Across America with Black girls run in the Tampa area. So that spreading the word really helps.
thank you. You all are an inspiration to your friends, to your families, to your communities. And consider engaging with groups like your running club, a book club. There's always an opportunity to do a service event together. And I'll turn it over to Sabriyah at this time in case there are any questions that were dropped in the chat or the Q&A feature. Sabriyah?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Alexandria. Thank you, Becca, Hess, and Briayna. So insightful. Thank you to our audience for the engagement. The chat has been on fire. I have been monitoring the engagement there. And then we had some folks who were using the Q&A feature. So I will jump right into it. Some of the first question came from Spirit. Spirit is one of our new museum volunteers. So we look forward to engaging. Spirit will also be conducting a workshop at our upcoming exhibition opening on February 7th. So we're looking forward to that. So thank you for being here, Spirit. And the question was, how can we as a collective legally identify and bring public attention to a Black enslaved people cemetery in Baltimore that may be intentionally obscured in plain sight within historic Druid Hill Park? What avenues, strategies, and civic tools are available to us as citizens to demand transparency, accountability, and a truthful historical record of this city-owned land and its past? And I know I think there was some engagement. I don't know if there was anything else that one of the panelists may want to add to Spirit's question. But I do know I think they received some resources in the chat. And I hope that was helpful, what you did receive, Spirit, in terms of who you could possibly contact and stay in touch with. So then I'll move on to the next question. Hess, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something, Hess?
Yes, I was going to add to Spirit. I was going to add to their question. One of the ways to bring awareness that a lot of us have access to is social media. A lot of these events, they share the information on social media, sharing the history, getting more people to talk about it, getting influencers to talk about it is very useful. And then getting in those partnerships, like Sabriyah said, and then also looking at the Baltimore City Parks and Recs. What program can they do there? What are some of the reconciliation commissions and organizations around the city that could work with uplifting that particular heritage? Because most people don't know that Druid Hill was a plantation. It's not that people don't care, it's that they don't know. And so getting the information out and then having a plan for people to act on that information, I think would be one of the ways we can bring public attention to it.
That's great. Thank you, Hess. And then this next question is pretty specific. I don't know if anyone here knows, but maybe if not one of the panelists and someone in the chat. This is from Diane Hutchins. How does someone get information about activities at or about Mount Auburn Cemetery?
Should I answer this one too?
Go for it. Yes, this is open to anyone.
Hopefully anyone else from Mount Auburn or connected to answers in the chat. But one of the contacts that I use is Brother Jesse Bennett. He is the youngest board member, and he is an elder. He's the youngest board member at Mount Auburn Cemetery, and I believe they also have a Facebook group where they do share events that are upcoming, and there are other events there. But getting in touch with Brother Jesse Bennett, trying to call the phone number, getting in that Facebook group where he's also active would be a way to get in touch with him too.
That is wonderful. Yes. And these questions are open to all of the panelists. And if there's anyone in the chat who may be able to offer any more additional information, that works as well. And then the next question seems to be what may be a two-part question that came from the same person. It asks, why is there more interest in Black cemeteries now than in the past? And then why there's this interest in cleanups at Black cemeteries by white people rather than descendants of those buried in Black cemeteries. So I don't know if there's like a technical answer to that, or if folks wanted to engage or not engage, or, offer what they may be thinking around that.
I can start. So I think, at least in my experience in doing a lot more of this in the last 7 or so years, the political climate really is an impetus for a lot of people. And so you don't realize how neglected things are or how in need things are until it's put in your face, in the newspaper, in your alert from your phone or what have you, that resources are being taken and or things are getting denied. And so you see more people the result ends up being people doing more fundraisers, doing more outreach, because what had been sustainable and kind of assumed to be solid and good, the rug's been ripped out from underneath of them. Black cemeteries, I'll say, I think when it comes to white folks is it's one of yeah, and how do I carefully say this? One of the ways in which they can um, get insight into Black life, Black experience, understand Black people without really having to engage with a plethora of living Black people. So it's a way in which they can learn, and even if with the best intentions, there's only a certain level of harm because they're researching and learning about, people that cannot respond back to them. Um, or and people that can't actively ask questions or run the risk of causing harm. And the interest I'll say in cleanups and stuff is because the need is so glaring. It's a visible need versus like for example what Rebecca was sharing, but even other people as I teased out with like the folks at the Banner recently and stuff too of the difference in the Annapolis National Cemetery, which is literally on the other side of the fence, and they purchased it from the exact same descendant of the enslaver that Brewer Hill was purchased from, and it is pristine constantly. Um, and so it's a glaring need. And it's not just the Annapolis National Cemetery, but you pass by St. Mary's Cemetery, St. Anne's Cemetery. There is a recurring structure, infrastructure, financially, volunteer-wise, the ethics and expectations of congregants. That lend itself to, being sustained, that a lot of Black cemeteries just don't have because a lot of our churches are dwindling in congregation. And then for Brewer Hill specifically, it has no congregation because it is not a specific church's cemetery. So there's a few different reasons there, but a lot of it will also, especially in the recent years, very much has to do with the political environment.
I also want to piggyback off of Brianna. Some people don't know also. One of the, like you said, we volunteered at the Annapolis Cemetery and they said Brewer Hill. And then we started doing our research. All of the ladies that were there that day when they helped at Brewer Hill, we started to do our research and didn't know. We just thought it was like a church, it belonged to a church and the church didn't take care of it. And so when we started to do our research, then that's when we found out, okay, this plot of land has a lot of history and we want to preserve the history. And I think that's why now a lot of people are starting to realize, to actually want to preserve preserve cemeteries, because they realize that a lot of our Black cemeteries are being sold and being made into a parking lot. There was a cemetery. I grew up in DC, and my mom, rest her soul, she passed in 2011, and she always said, "Don't bury me. Cremate me, because in 50 years they will be digging me up, putting an apartment building." And so she told me about there was a cemetery at the Rhode Island Avenue Metro. And in the parking lot was an all-day lot. And when they built the Metro, they dug up the bodies, transferred them somewhere else. And the problem with the parking lot is they started to get the sinkholes because they didn't fill the parking lot up. Well, if you drive by the Rhode Island Avenue Metro now, and I can tell you because I retired from there, you know what they did? They built a garage, and the all-day parking lot now has restaurants, retail establishments, and apartments. And that was a Black cemetery. That was a Black cemetery. So it's very important that it helps us with our heritage. It helps us to know where we came from. It helps us to know that, you know what, these are where our ancestors are born. One of the things that really touched me when we started walking around Brewer Hill, and also I went over to the John Wesley Cemetery, is to see a grave with a rock, with a stone. We know what that is. That's 9 out of 10 times that's a slave, because they couldn't afford headstones. They couldn't afford the pretty upright. So what do? They marked it with a stone. So I think a lot, like Brianna said, the political climate, that is what is increasing it. And also, we are now speaking out more about our heritage. It's no longer, oh, okay, well, that happened and we don't have to worry about it. For example, Crownsville. That was a perfect example coming out, letting you know this happened and this is where it occurred. And this is a historic land for African Americans, for Blacks, and we're not just going to hand it over and not take care of it. We're going to preserve it because we're preserving our history and our ancestors.
Thank you
Thank
for all
you.
of that. And I think if you will also look in the chat, there's some more engagement coming across in regards to that question. So thank you. Thank you to our audience and the panelists. And then one last question that came through that I think was really important, but I think like Alexandria had mentioned, it may be a broader topic or a wider topic, but it's more around volunteerism and how we engage and make sure that we're inclusive. I know Rebecca touched on it in her presentation and ways that we've done it at the museum. But I think as an organization, we're always thinking of ways and how we can make sure we're including those. And I think it came up the digital component. Alexandra, did you want to talk about that at all? I know Briayna touched on it a bit.
Sure.
So
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think Uh, Nancy Pro, please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, but I appreciate the question about how to engage with folks who are not necessarily in the digital space, aren't very tech savvy, maybe aren't attending webinars or regularly responding to emails. I know a lot of our volunteers, like Rebecca mentioned, may be retired because that is when they have the time to dedicate to special places and projects like this. So, I know that Brewer Hill has done a really great job at advertising their town halls for that in-person engagement, to hear it straight from the source, to give them updates on all their progress, and to let them know how to get or connect with the folks leading their various efforts and endeavors, right? There might be written publications that are still being published, whether it be your local newspaper, your neighborhood newsletter. Um, I know we try to do speaking events where people can gather and congregate, and a lot has changed since COVID. So if anybody else has ideas or suggestions for how we can reach folks who aren't able to join online or see the Facebook post or look for all the online engagement, please let us know. It is something we'll consider for future webinars around this topic, cemetery conservation, as that is something that the program and the commission and the museum will always support. It's where our communities rest, right? So please let us know in the chat, and if any of the panelists have any other ideas on how to reach people who are not tech savvy or just not connected online.
Alexandra, I have one more thing. A lot of places you can also find, you see a lot of, sometimes they take the historical houses and they make them into museums. Well, think about who kept those museums up. It was slaves. And so on that property, you will probably find some type of slave quarters and guarantee some burial places for slaves. A perfect example is Linda, who works at the museum. I met her at the museum. She used to volunteer, well, she volunteers at Goshen Farm. And she realized that at Goshen Farm, they had an area where the slaves lived. And so she created the Goshen Farm African American Heritage Committee. And so they realized that there were different areas along Goshen Farm where the slaves lived, where they farmed, where they worked. So that, and also where they were buried. So that's another place you can look at. It's a lot of historical places, historical houses. And like I said, who took care of them? Slaves did. So that guarantee they probably have burial areas there. They also can give you information about different cemeteries or burial plots within their vicinity.
I wanted to add to that part of the reason we see a lot of white volunteers at cemeteries is why we see them across the state in different industries is because many of them are white retired peoples. And so it then becomes about class, access, economic mobility, transportation, all of those things. It's not just exclusive to cemeteries. It is across the spectrum, across the heritage and environmental form. And the way that we address it is we start building our own ecosystem. Right now, we live in a place where many people are not even going to pick up their food. They're getting delivery. Everything is delivered. And so when we start thinking about how we get people online, we have to think about where are some of the last places that people go to. In Baltimore, maybe it's the grocery stores, the market, or Lexington Market. Maybe it's parties, maybe it's bookstores, maybe there are some places. The questions or the answers that people are looking for are requiring the work of everybody. Sometimes it is you opening your mouth and saying something. It is you sharing the information to build that ecosystem because our ecosystems have been disrupted, whether it's by Black codes, whether it's by people being kicked out of the street, whether it's by disability and lack of economic mobility. And then the other part is that especially in Maryland as a colonial state and with all the history we have, there has always been a wide interest in haunted tours, haunted history, ghosts this, ghosts that. And a lot of times the attendees are not Black people because we're typically the people who are haunting the place with our ghostly presence. And so we're coming up against a cultural thing of what it means to reclaim ghost stories. And that's another thing that we have to kind of go up against too. So one, building that ecosystem and realizing the landscape that we have up against where people are not leaving their houses as much anymore. And number two, what it means for us to reclaim the things that haunt the state and to go back into those places too.
Yes, that's so amazing. I had a conversation about this yesterday, I think, with Director Johnson around volunteerism and what it looks like and why it looks like what it looks like. And those ideas or components you just mentioned definitely came up. So thank you for putting it so eloquently and clearly. Yeah, thank you so much. I was looking, I don't know if some people may have withdrew their questions, but there were some questions that were here. But
I
they're not
answered some of them.
Oh, okay. I was like, I know I was supposed to. Thank you so much for answering those questions. And I think I'll just say thank you all so much. I mean, this was just power punch, like so much amazing information in this little bit of time. Such heavy hitters who were here, and then to the chat for everything and all of the information and knowledge that was shared there. And just so you all know, we did make history today with 116 people in attendance. Now I feel bad that I didn't sign us up for the Guinness World Book of Records. But you know what? As long as we are acknowledging each other, woo-hoo-hoo, thank you all so much for being here and being a part of this. And I would be remiss if I did not mention our upcoming opening for our new exhibition, She Speaks, opening on Saturday, February 7th. A full day of activation, a full day of art. It is going to be amazing. It's in person. We'll have music, food, everything. And once again, art from 14 Black women artists taking a look at the celebration or the remembrance of America over the last 250 years from a Black woman's lens. So it's going to be really, really, really powerful. And we hope that you all will join us in person. Once again, thank you, Alexandria. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Hess. Thank you, Briayna. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And we hope to see you at upcoming events. For those who asked, this program was recorded. Please be on the lookout for upcoming communications from us that will include the link, the recorded link. Thank you all again. Have a good evening. Good night.
Good night. Thanks for
you.
having me.
Thank you, Brianna. Thanks for coming. Thank you so much to all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. It's an honor.
Yes. Thank you, Rebecca.
And so much gratitude to you, Alex and Sabriyah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hess.
Nice meeting
That
you,
was
Hess.
amazing.
Amazing. We'll be in touch.
I'm trying to see. I'm going to go ahead and exit the webinar. Good night, Alexandria.
See you. Talk to you soon, Sabriyah. Thank you. Thanks for hosting us.
No,
Mhm.